Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. We have Samdarshi, Sumit, our guests here already from Indonesia. Fundamentally, when I was thinking about this show, I worked as an executive coach with CEOs across the world, and I found that there were a lot of insights that they had. And whether you're a CEO or whether you're an SME owner or whether you're a corporate executive or somebody who's retired, I just like you to know that we're all leaders in this world, right? Some of us lead at work when you're working, and all of us lead at home. We have our families watching us. We have our friends watching us. We set as a leader in this world today, you have a position of influence. And sometimes for those who look up to you, you can be a role model or you can be somebody, not to be, right? So I'm sure most of us want to be role models. And that's why we have Samdarshi. Sumit today is currently the president, director, and CEO of PFI Indonesia. Sam himself is a role model, besides actually being a cyclist, a yoga enthusiast, triathlete, somebody who's very spiritual, and he's also progressed. And that's why I thought he should be really the right person to actually be starting the show because he's a great role model. So thank you, Sam, here for joining us. So Sam, just tell them a little bit about who you are and what has been your journey and how have you managed to get where you are. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Mudit. I come from a very small town in the eastern part of India, erstwhile Bihar and now Jharkhand. The place is called Hazaribagh, where I spent my first 15 years till I finished my grade 10 schooling from there. And then I left home at that age, and ever since I have been a wanderer. Spent close to 12 years in Delhi, where I did my schooling in Delhi Public School, Arkepuram, and then did undergraduate management and a little bit of work also in Delhi. So all in all, 12 years. And I did my MBA from IIM Indore subsequently and spent about 9 years working in Delhi, in Bombay. Before I moved out of India, and last 10 years, other than Mumbai, I have been in Hanoi, Bangkok, and Jakarta in that order over the last few years. I think a big part of my early career started with financial services lending for an NBFC, and then post MBA, worked for a long time, 12 years in HDFC Bank, across a variety of roles from lending side to branch banking to business planning to HNW, Premier Banking Business. And I did so in Vietnam also with the bank. And then I moved to insurance, where the last 2 stints have been in a leadership role in insurance. So that's a brief profile.
Thanks so much, Samdarshi. But right through this journey, I think all of us see only the best, right? In terms of the fact that you're today a CEO, but share, with the audience some tough times of self-doubt, times when you did not succeed, times when things were not hunky-dory and you question your own self. Maybe that's something of a learning for people.
So I think most people on this call, my journey would not have been much different because there is a lot of failures and a few successes in our life, right? We tend to believe the successes to be more permanent, at least in our mind. But our life is full of various things. And if we are not failing enough, or if we are not challenged enough, we are not in an area where we are growing as individuals. So I would say I had my fair share of failures and challenges. To begin with, I would, again, if I have to go in chronological order and think about some big failures on the way, I would say coming out at 15 years of age in a time when we were not a WhatsApp call away. Those were the times of coin STD booths, leaving home at that age. where you can't sort of regularly speak to your parents or get some emotional support. And coming into Delhi was a pretty challenging time for me in the first few years. During that time, I had some prolonged illness, I think around my 12th grade, and it took me an extra year sort of in between my 12th grade to starting my education, because I had a couple of surgeries. I had some infection in my jawbone. It was a very odd thing, but it did impact me a lot. And at all those times, those failures look pretty big, or those challenges look pretty big, but you sort of get along. And as you keep working and you realize that there are so many things. I remember when I took my first job as a loan sales, frontline salesperson selling loans. I couldn't sell anything for the first 2 months. It's just that it was the first job. You didn't know how to do direct selling so well. And once after a few months, you knew the trick, you could sell very easily and it all looked so simple. But those 60 days when every day you will start cold calling, you will go and meet people, you will cold call from the directory and you can't still get a sale. It does, that rejection does take a toll at that point of time. Of course, 2008, wherever anybody was working was a challenging year in spite of whatever you did. The financial crisis sort of outdid you, so they could create challenges. And then I would say that moving out to a new country in a new role in a different cultural environment, and the bank I was working with was a professional run in HDFC Bank, but when I joined the bank in Vietnam, it was a promoter run. So even understanding that sort of your job is not just to execute a good strategy, you have to spend a lot of effort convincing people, and it may take a lot of time and it may look like you are failing for a very long period of time. Those would be sort of some of the key challenges. A number of them I did face during my career.
Okay, great. I think you've been fairly honest. I don't think there's anybody who's really starts off and sails off without it. But I guess like you said, right? People only see the success. So they probably have seen that, they only see you and your role model, avatar right now, and they don't know what you've gone through. So I think there's a lot of hope there for everybody. But, while you're going through that, right? So you've obviously worked across countries. You had a very interesting, I know in Vietnam, right? Language is a problem. So, how would you, new country, new language, and I think you've done it now with Vietnamese, Thai, and Indonesia. How have you sort of managed to just tide over this language barrier?
I would begin by saying that, first of all, I still haven't tied over the language barrier, but I have a better understanding. And I think some of the ground rules for me have been that make a sincere effort to learn or follow. And I'm very bad at languages. If I had to rewire my brain, I would definitely like to be better at languages. But what I really feel encouraged is that even if you are not very good, you make an effort, people around you appreciate it, because you exhibit sort of your keenness to adapt to that culture and not people. And as you get senior, you are just getting used to people adapting to you, to your style, to your preferences, to your strategy, to your ideas. So it gives you an opportunity for you to adapt to the local culture. So for me, I lay a lot of emphasis in sort of traveling within the country, meeting people, even with my broken language skills, try to have some conversations with people. Where it's critical, have some translation, but keep the communication going. Don't worry too much about the language barrier. And after a certain point of time, I mean, as an expat, there is a larger fear and I see many expats struggling with this, that you have a larger fear of being misunderstood. So you have to understand that you are starting from a position where even with good intentions, because of the manner in which you are used to speaking, people may misunderstand you. So do a lot of focus on how your body language is, or if you have to deliver a tough message, you have to really work hard to make sure that that's not misunderstood and misinterpreted, because it's very easy to misunderstand. We can also end up misunderstanding somebody who cannot speak in your language more easily. So I think these are some things I learned the hard way, and I would like to share with anybody who's embarking on this journey.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think today it's becoming a global world, and we'll have people, traveling across geographies and actually working in different areas. So I think this is good advice for those. But tell me, when you were, it's often said, right? It's a little lonely at the top. And when you're not being able to get through, or you have, as a CEO, you have the pressure from the board that expects you to perform. And then you're the buffer between, the board and the organization in many countries. And of course, there are wires that are going around, in a lot of countries, it's not as transparent. But when it's alone over there, how self-aware are you of your own thoughts and feelings, and, how do you manage and cope?
I think the two parts. One, concentrating on your comment, that sort of it's very lonely at the top. It is, but we don't have to make it that way. And I think for me, I've been lucky, or that in each of these countries and in each of these roles, I had some very trusted people who were always there to help me. They were with me because there was a genuine sort of friendship, relationship with your colleagues, who will tell you sometimes, put a arm on your back and say, hey, you could have done this differently. Vietnamese people don't like this or prefer it in this way, or Indonesian people prefer in this way. So the first goal should always be to make sure that you are not lonely. You have a set of people with whom you are interacting very regularly. You reach out to them even after a meeting, that how did it go? How was my message? How did my message come through? Because there is many a time that difference between intention and how people understand it, especially in a cross-cultural environment. So again, the key message is to sort of form a quick set of people who are there always to help you and have your best intentions in mind. Coming back to the other question, which is more on sort of, how do you reflect upon it, and sort of how are the things. So I would say that we all follow the analogies of cricket. If you are playing for the 5th time, if you're a Sachin Tendulkar, and you get into Wankhede, you know that stadium inside out, right? You don't have to worry about it. But if you are playing in an outside ground, then you need, again, the preparation time. You need to look closely at the pitch and see what and how that pitch will play. And you need to observe the first few deliveries very carefully as it comes along. So this is more in the terms of that you need a lot more frequent reflection of what is going right and what is not going right. What do I see? And then some sort of conversation going on with people whom you trust to get a clear sense. But this has to be done in a very rigorous and routine manner. If somebody, I make a plan that for the first 100 days, I will sort of check in every 7 days on myself of how I am doing. Post that, maybe I can take once a month. Post that, maybe after a couple of years, once a quarter. but it's the first 100 days where impressions are formed, friendships are made, real relationships are formed, and those are the critical, that's the critical time.
Okay, so thanks, Sam. I think there were some real learnings there. The way I took it away, one is, your own behavior, right? How do you reflect, and how do you behave with people? A certain transparency, and then I heard that try and build a set of people whom you can trust, who will give you feedback, right? Because yes, I can understand. When cultures are different, sometimes, especially in Eastern cultures, which are not that direct. They may not tell you on your face, but it's great. So I think you've been able to build that. We talked about leadership, which is very very often external, but I'd like to come back to an area which is really internal, which is self leadership. How are you able to manage your emotions? How are you able to be resilient? How are you able to in different countries? So you've done at least 3 international countries, and it's such a different thing in India. So how do you sort of lead yourself through every day, over years, to keep performing, and how does it all help?
Yeah, I think this is a subject on which several books have been written about self-leadership. But my own little experience, this is something which is very critical. And for me, the first step towards this is very effective listening. You cannot, think very deeply and think and reflect for yourself till you are very actively listening what others are talking about. So if there is a person who's angry or upset, it's beyond listening to his words. It's the next stage is trying to understand what could be his motivation, why is he thinking like that, what is really sort of getting him into a zone or a mood like this. And then you start to self-reflect sort of upon yourself, that what is your reaction should be, or if you have already reacted, whether it came as a retort, as getting back, or did you do it with a sort of sense of understanding. And in all this sort of, if you think deeply, it helps a lot for you also to manage the stress, for you also to have a calm and cooling presence in front of others. And, you are more resilient in general, because you are thinking from a cool head, and you know that you can get away with this, rather than you are reacting and making things even worse for yourself. And I think in all this, the other very important aspect is that you should have a clear higher purpose, or a defined purpose, or a defined objective statement for yourself of what you have set out to do. Sometimes some issues come up which sort of distract you, or you lose control of the situation. But if you are very clear of what is your objective and purpose and what do you want to achieve out of it, it helps you sometimes rein in your own thoughts and your actions.
Okay, great. So I think what I took away was listening, being aware of your own behavior very clearly, as well as, I think the intentions, right? Because sometimes, even though language may be a barrier, people, I think, like they say, right, verbal speaking is actually only hardly 2 to 5% of all communication. The rest of it is exactly the way you come across, the feelings people get, your behavior. So it's really, I think you've sort of, actually nailed it, because in different cultures, it could be interpreted differently. Now, tell me, just dealing with the stresses. I mean, you've been pretty young, and you've been a CEO at, in your early 40s, very much like a startup, even though you're in a financial services business. But tell me, managing work and, different country, and then how do you manage with your family and, your friends? How do you bring that balance? And what would you advise people? Because I hear people are very stressed, and, obviously people who are CEOs, they set the agenda, right? So how do you manage yourself? And what do you do? What reflective practices to keep cool and, balance these various roles that all of us have?
Yeah, I think, thanks. That's a very, very interesting question. And I think everybody in this call is trying to find that balance of how to do it. So we are all students in this game. Nobody has still discovered the right answer. And once we discover the right answer, it's sort of, we'll hit the jackpot. But some of the things I follow is first, always, when you try to assess the situation, always look at the human biological clock. We are designed, for example, to sleep for 8 to 10 years. Most companies, you are supposed to finish work at 6 o'clock and start the next day at 8 or 9 o'clock. So there is a period of about 15 hours of rest. So the way the human body or the work is designed is that you need periods of neutral periods for you to be at your best productive self when you are there at work. And the best time of that neutral period, other than sleep, which is important, which is very, very critical, you have to see of how do you spend that time in something which you are very passionate about. And that will really de-stress you, or that will neutralize you, or that will keep your brain and yourself very fertile when you are back into the room. So people, type A and type B errors. Some people think that to succeed, you have to just do more and more work. It does work for a certain period of time, but when you have to use softer skills more, and if you don't have that time, you will show up in your work attitude. You may be more irritable, you may be in bad moods and things like that. You may try to fill your calendar by routine and not really do some strategic thinking. Or there is the other type that people don't have anything else beyond work. So while they can come back in time, they don't know how to spend that time, frankly speaking. Just Netflix, or it can kill your time for some time, and entertainment has its own role for you to de-stress. But after some time, you are not sort of playing or adding value, or are not so much deep into it that you are getting that period of rest. And plus the screen time and other things, if you are a lot on your phone, it just doesn't let you get into a very neutralized state. So for me, sometimes practicing yoga, or if I'm doing a triathlon, then I have to virtually run, cycle, and swim a couple of days in the week. And those are the periods where I feel energized, where I feel focused, where I can clear a lot of clutter which comes in my mind. And I think that this kind of a balance and routine and is very helpful personally for me.
Okay. Thanks so much, Sam. You brought out a very, very interesting point. I work with a lot of senior executives, and sleep is something that, when people are working across time zones, etc., and I think they're not giving enough importance to that. And, the whole screen thing that's there, people get so consumed with social media that they're actually not sleeping, and they really are suffering. So I think it's a great piece of advice to possibly get that piece of sleep, right? That's one thing. And the other thing I took out was have something more besides work, because very often, you've heard of Ratan Tata, Narayan Murthy. A lot of people tell us, listen, you must get a life because you have to walk away. Everyone, unfortunately, today with the pursuit of power, and it's taken as a badge today to say that I work so hard and people neglect themselves. But the analogy very often that they said is that there are many balls in life, right? So you drop your work, maybe it can come back. You drop your money or wealth or whatever, you don't do well for some time, you can obviously get it back, right? But you drop your family or you drop your relationships or your health, right? It's very difficult to get some of these balls bouncing back. So thanks so much for telling us. And here, I think there's a very interesting comment from Shadri Iyer who says, is cool factor an inborn trait of all people based out of Jharkhand? I just couldn't resist sharing that with you.
I can vouch for that for MS Dhoni. I don't know anybody else who's that cool, but
okay. So thanks, Shadri, for that nice one, which came in. Okay, so now that we've looked a lot internally, right? I mean, because I sincerely believe that in a VUCA world, your ability, nobody knows what's going to happen. I don't think anybody could, fathom or deal with the COVID environment, right? So your ability to have great self-awareness, self-leadership, a lot of mindfulness, reflective practices are things that are actually going to help leaders. But moving from the internal to the external world, because this is what a lot of people, and I think we have people from across generations here on this group. Tell me, I mean, what advice would you give, let's say, middle-level managers who want to become CXO, right? And what advice would you give them? What do they need to do? Because it's a pyramid, right? So they're all working hard, and then suddenly it comes, at every stage, you sort of keep getting thinner and thinner. So what helps them break that middle level and get into the next level?
That's an interesting question, I would say, in my opinion and in my view, and this is also drawn from a nice book which I read, is that in the first stage of life, when you start working, a big factor for you to succeed is your drive. I see a lot of young people, they start to drop out if they don't have that drive, because when you start work, you have to learn to, in that early learning phase, you need to have that drive to sustain yourself. And if you want to get into the middle management position, the CXO positions or whatever is C-suite executive is at the top of it, and then you want to be a CEO. So the second very critical sort of thing I see is influence. I clearly see that people who have drive, they move very fast in the organization at the early stage. These are the guys who are achieving their sales target, designing the brand campaign, making sure that things are working. But as you come in the middle, influence, because you need support of other department beyond your department. You need to work with partners in a lot of sales organizations. You need to work with people outside of the organization, vendors, depending on which function you are. And your influencing skills comes to the fore, where people are not in your direct line of reporting. And there are some people who are brilliant, who have a lot of drive, but their inability to influence others, and including your teammate, because as you start to get in the middle, you are mostly leading a sort of accomplished people who are already there, maybe a couple of years behind you, or maybe your age group. So then the influencing skills become very important, because you just can't command them. And those managers who sort of are not able to adapt or add the influencing skills to their drive fail. And then at the end, at the top, I would say is the judgment, because you have to take a lot of decisions, betting on people, betting on business model as you become sort of the CEO and some of the very top positions, and even the CXO in some of very large organizations. So how good your judgment is, which is a combination of your experiences in the past and what kind of diverse opinions you can gather from various people, and what good decisions you can take depends on how successful you are in that role at the top. And some of this sort of, there's a book I read, very nice book called The CEO Factory, which is sort of covering about many of the CEOs which Unilever in this Hindustan Unilever keeps producing across many in the industry, and what are some of the traits which have been sort of observed. But this is, I sort of reflect back and look at it, and this is sort of from my experience with various people who worked with me over the years.
Okay. So thanks, Sam. Just one quick one that I'll pick up from Chittabrata, who mentioned, you talked about influencing, but how do you influence yourself? What tips would you give? Because I think all of us in our careers, right, we're sort of constantly, I think perhaps he wants to know, how do you influence yourself to keep going and really having that motivation to keep, going?
Yeah, that's a good question, and thanks, Chittabrata, for it. I touched this upon a little bit earlier, where we spoke about self-reflection, and you can call it in various words, depending on what the user does, but some kind of taking stock. Nobody else can tell you, because you are not fully exposed in that manner to somebody else. Sometimes some bosses are good mentors and they can tell you, but you have to influence yourself first to have that drive to be able to take stock of what is it that I am doing right, what are my weaknesses, which of the weaknesses I can afford to ignore, but which of them may turn out to be fatal. So you keep sort of taking stock of things and seeing that what is it that I need to build, what is it that I need to add in my next year, in my this year, in the following year. So then you will be able to sort of influence first, and then you can pick up things. If you think that I need to improve on my public speaking, you need to force yourself to follow through and get on the stage, find the forum, find every opportunity outside of work or inside of work to get through to your stage fear. If you think that you are too busy in your work and you're not really building a relationship across to people, find yourself, make a grid of who are the people who you want to build a relationship. How will you contact them? How often will you contact them? So I'm just giving some illustrative purposes to sort of explain the point around self-reflection. And various people, some people journal as a matter of self-reflection, they will write. Some people meditate, some people do it while doing active sports. So you have to see what works for you, because each person is different, and then just do it often enough. Don't think that it will happen on its own.
Yes, absolutely, Sam. I think you've touched two very important things here. One is that Rome wasn't built in a day, right? It's probably taken you 20 years to get where you are. And I understand the world of startups, etc., where people are getting younger, but there is something that you need to keep. And given the fact that everybody's going to face, issues personally, health, with work, there's obviously something that has to be within the person. And which brings me to something which I notice now is with millennials, right? So you have this young set of people, and I found them at work. They want to make an impact immediately, and if they don't feel they've sort of changed the organization in the first year or two, they feel that they've not achieved much. What is your advice? Because I'm sure you're also getting in a lot of millennials from across the world to work in your organization.
Yeah, again, that's a very good question, Mudit, and I think most of your questions are the most difficult to answer. because we are still again grappling with this of how uh, to engage constructively with millennials. So I'll try to break it into a few parts and say that the first part is that we need to again understand them better. We grew in a totally different environment. We had lesser choices. Let's say, take an example of, we had a few TV channels, Doordarshan, and maybe when we were in our teens, cable television came in, and still the choices were few. And we were very satisfied because of those limited choices being available. But the world has changed. And now people are growing up flipping channels, and now even just customized content on OTT. So with each sort of few years, people are spoiled for choice. And that choice is a habit. We would accept at work whatever is given to us, like we accepted that one channel which we had, or two channels which we had for television watching. So we were wired in that way. But this generation, or the millennials, are not wired in that way. So we have to understand and look at things. And the sort of TV channel is just an illustration. The other thing, I think we grew up with a lot of critical feedback at school. Your parents will always tell you, but this is a generation where hardly there are few exams, maybe much fewer than what we used to have. Everybody tells you you are very good, you are perfect for the world. And then when you land up in the real world, which is when you find your feet in business, suddenly people start to do performance appraisal and tell you that your aspirations are higher than your capability, and so on and so forth. So we have to understand that the environment in which they are growing. Now, part of dealing with them is giving them a lot of choices. At the end of the day, even for work, even in things where our bosses would have taken some decisions, and at a young and early stage, we will think that our job is to follow through and make that happen. But now we have to engage with them of saying, okay, what are the options? These are the options. Okay, one or two just looks out, but rest of your 8 options, you go figure out for yourself. Though we may know that option 4 and 5 are very good, but we have to give them the freedom to choose, because that freedom to choose is part of their wiring network. The moment we say that do 4 or 5, they would end up saying that I will do anything other than 4 or 5, because they are not used to be told. So that's, I think, from a manager perspective, I feel that we need to engage with them. We need to give them a lot more choices, because they are just used to it. They have far more career choices, job opportunity choices, so many other things than what we had. And if we don't understand that, and if we think that they will operate in the once they come into a company, they will start operating like we were operating, that will never happen. We will just end up disappointing ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Now, one of the things that when I work with a lot of executives on that, who sort of try and coach them, one of the things they very often say is, we are working so hard, and everybody's working hard, and our health is suffering, etc. But then, when an opportunity comes up, very often, the company just hires from outside. So if you just look at it specifically, when there have been technology shifts, right? So it started in our era when the internet first came in, etc. Right? Nobody had those skills. So, the company just went out. Then now it's been, this whole digital transformation, which has really got now those who have those skill sets. So people within an organization who've been working very hard, and then suddenly, you have to pivot. And those skills are not there within the organization, right? So as a CEO, as a board, you need to get somebody and you go out and get somebody else from outside to do something which a lot of people internally might have felt. So what is your advice? And I find a lot of them get disappointed saying that, why weren't we considered for something as important as this? So what's your advice to, executives in terms of managing their own careers as well as, the aspirations of the organization, right?
Yeah. Uh, thanks, Mudit. And again, I would put my two bits to it and try to respond to it. That one, I think executives at an early age have to understand that this is an infinite game, right? We are looking at 99-year lives. We are looking at 40-year careers. And you have to prepare yourself for it. If you're going to run a marathon, and I go back to my sports analogy, like once I decided to do an Ironman, I had a 2-year training plan to do that, right? Where I had to add, I hadn't cycled for many years. Probably I was running a little bit, and my swimming was just too poor, where I had to take a coach I knew. So just to draw a parallel with that, I took in, and everybody has to say that, okay, what is it that you need coaching? What do you need? What are the skills you need to develop? And then you have to patiently work towards it. Every month, there are some people who started training with me, and they just overworked in the first few months and injured themselves, and their Ironman wishes sort of went away. So you have to stage it. You don't have to see that, oh, the others are cycling so well and I'm in the same race. But you have to do your 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 70, and then 90. And even when you run a full marathon or whatever, you always do 70, 80% of that and stop there, because then when you show up for the main, you are in a different zone and you can do it. But a lot of people there, I think, that sort of don't look at it as a long-term game. And because of that, there is that exhaustion or single skill development. I also believe very strongly that there's a very nice model by a guy called Nick Petrie, who talks about vertical development. So a lot of executives are spending too much of time in horizontal development, which is, if I had started my career in auto loans, and I know that if I would have spent the last 22 years in auto loans, I would have been fantastic at auto loans. Maybe I would have been a very senior position in auto loans, but switching and getting into a heat experience, suddenly getting into branch banking where I don't know about operations and I have to read operations manual, it has wired my main, given me an experience, and those heat experiences sort of prepare us that the next time there is an unknown challenge thrown at you, how do you live up to it? So the vertical development, which comes through colliding perspective, heat experiences, self-reflection, all of that adds up. And many of the executives miss doing that. And then they realize 15 years down the line that, hey, this opportunity the board is giving away to somebody else. But they haven't invested to be preparing themselves to get into unknown territory. You can't do it straight away in the big game. You have to do it in the small games, take small risks early in your life, so that you will be prepared to try your hand. And the second dimension of this is that a part of it is always looking at that, what are the emerging skills, and how do I ask people what I don't know. I remember 5 years back sitting in a boardroom in Bangkok, and somebody presenting to me the SEO strategy which generally should be following. And I didn't know what SEO was. And I asked him that question in front of everybody, that can you explain SEO to me? But my one down was sort of a senior person and that person's immediate boss. And later on, I asked him, yeah, do you understand SEO? He said that no, but I asked him why you didn't ask about it. He said that no, I look like a fool saying that I am the head of marketing and distribution, but I don't know about these parts of SEO strategy as clearly. I said that there will be always new things coming your way. Ask, go up, read, ask experts. But if you are living in denial, then suddenly one day that moment arrives when somebody who is to recruit you or hire you or promote you in an organization for the next level will have to get somebody else because he doesn't have the confidence that you can adapt and learn and deliver that role for the organization.
Okay, great, Sam. I think, couple of things that I picked up there was that, constantly upskill yourself, over time. Don't just look at one vertical, try and get some width of experience, right, in different areas so that you're constantly challenged. You've got to be relevant. I think that's the essence that I'm picking up. And today, at least that's the way I see it, because an organization, right, will always focus on its own goals. And, whereas individuals are going to focus on their careers. Now, when there's a match between organization needs and individuals' careers, it's great, right? So sometimes it doesn't happen. So which takes us to another thing, like you've actually changed jobs also, right? So what is your advice? I know not that people are asking because job switching is becoming a norm, but when you as a CEO are looking at somebody's resume, right? I guess a few job switches are okay, but if you find somebody, doing it too often, what is your take or what is your advice? When should one look out? At what stage of their career?
I think couple of things on job change and career. I would always say that I see far too people quitting a job because they are unhappy with it. I have never done it. And I've always moved on to something else when I think that there is a bigger or a greater opportunity, because you can never undo some sort of unhappiness or frustration by just switching jobs. They will follow you into the next job, believe me, because 60 to 70% time it has to do with you and not with the job or the boss or the environment. We give them a lot of importance, but the fact is it has to do, we have to learn how to manage that environment. So always look at the opportunity. And when you measure an opportunity, it doesn't have to be about money. It has to be about, it has to be about your learning curve or your growth. So for example, when I moved from lending to branch banking, it was a very stressful period for me in those 2-3 years, because I was probably, back in those HDFC Bank days, a cluster head who had never been a branch manager. Almost everybody had been a branch manager. So I had to work extra hard to read the operations manual. And 6 months down the line, probably people were working on memory and I had read all the manuals and I could do it very well because I had read really all the manuals. But it was an effort. It was an effort outside my comfort zone. And you have to take that effort. The other thing is that sometimes you have to be ready for a negative impact also on your career. It's like, the biggest shots in cricket, when you have to hit it, you need a strong backlift. So whenever you are switching, you will not be the hot candidate because you have already made a reputation. Let's say within HDFC Bank, having spent 12 years, I had worked with many of the bank leaders. And even if I failed in one thing, I knew that I had the backing and there were many things going for me. But when I went into Vietnam, into a completely new organization, it could have gone either ways. So there was a risk taking. There was a time when you are moving in the same zone where you could have moved forward in the same stream. So those are some of the calls which you have to take. And again, look at everything from a 10, 20-year perspective, that will this experience add some real skills to me, or is it just a job flip for some extra money?
Okay. So great. You're saying, invest, build your skills, try and get different kinds of experiences. Don't just run. Of course, this is, difficult advice for a lot of millennials today to follow, because I think the great resignation is a big problem, for a lot of people. And in IT, apparently, it's just, going completely awry, but we leave that particular sector. But, great to share your thoughts. But as we are coming in towards the end, and I'm going to open, a few questions out later on, some more that I picked up in the chat. I just want to ask you, when you're 45, you're a CEO, what do you feel is really your purpose? Do you feel, what is the legacy you wish to leave behind, either at work or in your personal life? Just something that can give others a feel of, what Sam really is.
My metrics or my purpose is looking at things from two dimensions. One is the impact on what impact do you want to do to make basis your skills and other things. So for example, being in the financial services industry, I feel compelled that some sort of financial wellness, if I can use a very high-flying term and explain it, that like as insurers, we are in these markets where the penetration is very low. There is a great room to design consumer-centric product. And if those products are brought to the customers, your organization grows and you are making a real impact on the final stakeholder, which is a customer. People need financial planning help and all those things. So I would look at it that how to create a larger impact, how to create a larger social impact is the overarching cause, which is far superior than your own, personal ambitions and other things. The other thing is to look at your immediate circle of influence. What kind of an impact you can make on them. If you can't take care of people who are around you in a positive, constructive way, forget about making an impact, positive impact on people who are far and beyond, who may be your customers, because all of us are limited in terms of the reach. So I personally feel that if there are people who are with me in the management team, people who are my next level of leadership team, people who are my core partners, how to engage with them, learn from them, teach a few things to them, really go out of the way, mentor a few people. And people did it for me in my career, and the best way of thanking them is to sort of pay it forward. So I would, when I hang up my boots, I would like to definitely see that if I have made a real impact on some people, and in the business I am in, and the businesses have grown, a lot of consumers have accepted those products. Those are the two metrics sort of I would look at as for me of a greater purpose.
Okay, so great. From what I heard was, one was, impacting the industry and, impacting the larger, country in terms of, developing stuff. And then on a personal level, you said it's more about making an immediate impact to people around you, right?
Yeah.
So great. As we come to that, maybe I'll take a few more questions from the audience that are there and I saw. One of the questions was, I think Johnny had raised, earlier, was in terms of, keeping a no meeting day, so that you give people some time, etc. What is your take on that, especially that people are working, a lot of hours these days? Yeah.
I think it's a good idea of keeping a no meeting day. It just reminds everybody that, meetings are not work, right? We have to do some thinking, and no meetings days solve that problem. But I would say that if we can address it at the very root level, and people in leadership position, if they create a culture that there is a right balance between internal meetings, external meetings, customer meetings, or no meetings at all through the week, that is the most optimum way. But when organizations become very large, it is sometimes easier to implement something like a 1 day in the week where there will be no meetings, so that people are forced to create a routine of self-reflection, which I earlier spoke about.
Okay, great. So I just opened up any more questions anybody has that you would like to share. Just put it on the chat and I'll pick it up. And
my question from Suresh: when do you think it's the right time to hang up the corporate boots? So I think, first of all, that gray hairs as a no-no is changing. If you see during COVID times, the phenomenon in US called the Great Resignation. India, it still has a demographic dividend and a lot of people are coming into the workforce. But at some point of time, we will have more and more value for gray hair. It's a matter of time, I feel. When do you think is the right time to hang up the corporate boots is a very you have to determine it. All I can say is that there will be some setbacks in your career because the management may be thinking, or the company may be thinking, or you may not have reinvented yourself to the core, but it's never too late. I have seen some fantastic people who have been laid off during COVID times, who are extremely good people, I personally know, but it's something that the organization faced a challenge, or the industry faced a challenge, or some things got created and they have reinvented themselves. This is a time, when you hear these stories, all of you saw the story of Nykaa, right? Falguni Nair quit her corporate job at 50 and created something so great in the last 7 to 8 years. And that's one story, but there are many such stories of people well into their 50s, harnessing all their learning and experience to create things of their own, which have a much higher impact than what they were doing as corporate executives. So don't let somebody decide for you when to hang in your boots. If you want to hang in for work-life balance, or to spend more time at family, or you have parents who need your time and things like that, it's up to you. But if a company fires you, come back stronger, reinvent yourself.
Fantastic. So for what I took away from that was, Sam, one, it's an individual choice, right? Secondly, reinvent yourself if things haven't gone very well, and you can actually, do things. So there's no one size fits all. I think the important thing is that all of us are going to live for a very, very long time. And in the sense that medical history will ensure that we're all alive. But I think the only time, the way I see it is retirement is when you stop people should never retire. I mean, keep doing things. I think the, old way of looking at in terms of retiring and giving up some sort of permanent job might still be there. But, the mind is really active only when you really follow your own passion. And I think all of us, whether even at 60 or whatever, have a good 20, 30 years of your life ahead of you. So lots Indeed. To look forward to.
The new retirement is continue to work, but not for money.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you want money, not money, but, follow your dreams, follow your passion, do something. So we're at the top of the hour. If there's any more questions, I saw one question here was on, what's the role of mind, inner work or mindfulness? Johnny had that question in terms of in the work context. Do you want to address that? Or
Sorry, can you?
Yeah, the question was, what's the role of mindfulness or inner work in the work context?
I think that's sort of a springboard to come back full of ideas, to self-reflect, to find some things where you can do things better, even if you like take 5 minutes out to think that what could have I done differently, for example, on my day-to-day. Where did I let my emotions run over me? And you do some things like this over a period of time, you will see that your emotions are getting the better of you less and less. So it has a very important, and as you keep getting senior, you have to form the culture, and the culture is not only about values, but it is about your behavior. So mindfulness, I personally believe, gives you a better grip on your behavior. You can walk the talk, you can exhibit what you expect and what you always say about doing. So it has a very, very important role to play.
Okay, so we're a little over time now. If there are any other questions, otherwise, so I'd really want to thank all of you once again for coming in. And thanks, Sam. Thank you so much. Deepak, would you have something? Anybody?
It's good to see you both, Mudit and Sumit. It was wonderful and really enjoyed, each and every second of it. Great going. Keep it up. All the very best, Samdarshi. Really appreciate and, really watch with awe, your progress. Keep it up.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Really, thank you so much for your kind words. And thank you, everybody, for coming in. Thank you and goodbye until we meet again. We'll have our next session soon. Just stay tuned and we'll have our next CEO in the room in the next, I think by Friday 18th. And thank you very much for coming by. Thank you very much.